Shenge?
I'm in, Chair. Sure.
Yeah, you can see
Um,
on the wheelchair they hosted at the airport. I'm still sorting out the in of my assistant. So I will close my video. Can you please just open the meet? Shenge? Honorable Vitalis. Am I audible?
Yes, Chairperson, you are.
Okay. Is Honorable
Chair,
Vitalis also audible?
I'm in. Thanks.
Okay.
I'm in.
I've closed my
Okay.
video because I'm in the public space here. I'm sorting out other issues. But I'll be in meeting. The leader of Salga, we are made to understand that is Honorable Lesitja Dikhale. He's the one who's leading the delegation. Can I open the meeting now?
I got show 9, Chairperson.
Pardon?
It's
I'm not at the
9
lounge
o'clock.
yet.
Come again,
Oh, it's not yet 9.
Yeah. Upambi, we have still got
But
6 minutes.
It's 6 minutes. I just hope I will make it. Okay, let's wait for the minutes for the others to join. Yeah, okay.
Recording in progress.
Babado.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, Chairperson.
Young Bon.
Yes, Chairperson. Buona, Chair. Buona, Chair.
Right. Okay.
Yes.
Wavuma ngangezwa nje right. Right picture.
Oh, maybe volume maybe pants. Yes, Chairperson. And
must check in.
Yeah. Right, much.
Yes, Chairperson.
10:55, ne?
Thanks. Sure, bye. Babalo.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, Chair.
Is the chair connected?
Yes, Chairperson, she's connected.
Okay. It's now 9 o'clock. Honorable Chair, you can start. Please call her because she wanted to start about 5 minutes ago. Can you please call the chair to see whether she's having problems?
Okay, thank you, Chairperson.
Babalo?
Morning, Chair. Yes,
Babalo.
Chair. Yes, Chairperson. I did get hold of the Chairperson. She's going to start the meeting now, Chair.
Okay.
Thank you. Apologies.
Hello, honorable members. Hello.
Morning, Chair. We can hear
Am I
you.
audible?
Yes,
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, Chairperson.
We can hear.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are, Honorable Chairperson. We can hear you very well.
Okay, thank you. My apologies, Chairperson, and to the members and team from Salga for the inconvenience. It's something that was beyond my control. Let me start by welcoming everybody for the meeting. Today's session were the two committees of the Appropriation, Select Committee on Appropriation and Spending Committee on Appropriation from NA. Both houses are represented to a full complement of Parliament. So I will be starting with the opening. You have seen the agenda here. We are also encouraged. Special welcome to Honorable Dikhale. I hope he's in. My mayor from Tembisilahani and your team. Can I step to item number 2 and check on the apologies? Lubabalo?
Thank you, Chairperson. Good morning, Chairperson. And good morning, Chairperson Buthelezi and honorable members of both committees. From the Select Committee on Appropriations side, we have an apology from Honorable Karim. Honorable Karim indicated that he will be unable to join the meeting because he is traveling from Cape Town to KZN. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much about that. Apologies noted. Can I check with Darren?
Yes, good morning, Honorable Chairperson and members. From the Standing Committee on Appropriations, we've got an apology from Honorable Sarupen on the basis of ill health. Thank you.
Okay. Wishing him the speed recovery. Honorable members, thank you for that. And we are noting the two apologies from the honorable members. We are now going to step to item number 3, which is consultation with the South African Local Government Association, SALGA, on the division of a new bill, Amendment Bill B 33 of 2023. I'll now take this opportunity to hand over to SALGA and allow the leader of SALGA to take over and make a presentation. Maybe Honorable Dikgalo, you'll make an overview and over to whoever is going to make a presentation, or you are going to make a presentation. Over to you, SALGA.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair of the committee. We want to take this opportunity to greet you, Honorable Mahlangu, the chair of this committee, and take this opportunity again to greet honorable committee members and greet everybody, my team from SALGA. We want to say we are privileged today to have this opportunity to come and present to this honorable house what SALGA believe are key points that must be looked at as we are dealing with appropriation of this nationally raised revenue and dealing with this bill that speaks to that. The first thing is that from SALGA, we want to appreciate the global economic challenges that are affecting us as a people and as a nation, South Africa. We truly do that and understand those economic fundamentals that we must accept are showing a lot of negatives. The level of growth is not satisfactory. The level of unemployment, the level of investment are not satisfactory, which create an economic conundrum for us as the state. Secondly, we also want to appreciate the government debt that is rising, which shows that our collection is not at an optimum level, which create a problem in terms of budgetary appropriation moving forward. Having said that, as local government, we have always indicated, Chair, that there is structural underfunding of local government, meaning the money that is being given to local government in relation to our constitutional mandate and functions truly represent an injustice, which we have engaged with the president and we were given a task to come up with a formula which I believe by next year, March, will be ready for presentation, because we have just, as the NEC, got the draft, and that will make local government function optimal. Events, particularly issues relating to load shedding. Local government has suffered greatly because of load shedding, Chair. Because of what we call unsaved energy, local government is losing around 21 billion. On the vandalism of our infrastructure during load shedding, local government at this point, we are losing around 1.6 billion. So these structural challenges that has nothing to do with local government, as we are engaging, we must look into how do we mitigate that funding gap created by this situation like load shedding. Because if we don't, local government will continue to have challenges moving forward to carry its constitutional mandate. Finally, Chair, as part of our recommendations, we believe that the current intervention that the National Treasury is bringing to in relation to ESCOM relief, we are very unhappy with some of the conditionalities there. They look like they want to, from local government that are guaranteed by state department and a sphere of government, wrangling around what is constitutionally mandated to a sphere of government. I think it is about time we remember that we are a state with 3 spheres of government, which is there to facilitate proper democracy. So it is important whenever we are intervening, we remember that we are one state that needs to function according to intergovernmental relations at the final analysis. So those are some of the key things we want to bring, that when we intervene, for example, you can't say, according to 16.4 of the current intervention on the ESCOM matter, you can't say then, if you are unable to do certain things, we'll take a license. We believe that the best way to deal with the mechanism of service provision is in terms of Section 78 of the Municipal Systems Act, that clearly check whether you are able to do that, not to arbitrarily take responsibility in a manner that shows aggression. So those are some of the things that we want to look at, and we are saying it is important that when funding is brought to local government, economic elements like inflation must be looked at, because most of the time you find that all the increases, like the 6.8 billion, it is way below inflation, meaning in real terms, there is no increase at all. So it is important that as we deal with local government with its myriad of careful not to exacerbate the situation. But just to complete the technical Pasha, to complete the technical part of our report. Mayor Pasha, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Honorable Chairperson Mahlangu and Honorable Chairperson Buthelezi and Honorable members of the committees. Lubabalo, I don't know if you've received my presentation, if you can flight it, or if I'm allowed to present from my side.
Yes, you do have the course. Right?
Okay, thank you. Are you able to see my presentation?
Yes, we are.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
I'm not going to waste any more time because my chairperson has already outlined some of the key challenges, the key issues that we are commenting on regarding MTBPS and the DORA bill. This is the outline of our presentation. I'm not going to go into it. But the main purpose of our presentation is to provide the Standing Committee on Appropriation with the comments from local government regarding the DORA bill and the MTBPS 2023. Chair, I'm not going to go through the constitutional background. I think most of the members are aware of it. But in terms of the economic outlook, we have observed that the stagnating growth in the global economy has significant implications to local government, because it affects how local government and other spheres of government is the raising of revenue, and we then see that it impacts negatively to local government because it has been receiving the least share of the nationally raised revenue. In terms of this outlook, Chair, we are then observing that this will put immense pressure on local government due to the declining funding that we have been receiving as the sector. On the domestic outlook, Chair, we have noted that the increased interest rates have increased the debt servicing cost of municipalities, which has significantly increased their expenditures. The inflation that has been rising has also eroded the the disposable household income of customers of local government, and have impacted their ability to pay municipal accounts and afford municipal accounts, and also pay off their outstanding debt, Chair. As the Chair has outlined, that we have done a study in SALGA in March 2023, and these are the outcomes of the findings of that study. And that study looked into the impact of load shedding on infrastructure of municipalities and finances of municipalities. He has outlined the key numbers there, Chair, which municipalities need to absorb into their budgets, which has put so much pressure, Chair. And some of the key issues there is vandalism has been taking place, which municipalities need to ensure that they fix to make sure that services are delivered and are delivered consistently, Chair. In terms of the infrastructure delivery of the MTBPS, we do welcome the the review of the PPP to unlock financing. We are, however, saying that local government should be properly consulted so that they are included in this unlocking of finances and capacitating of technical skills and greater participation in the PPP projects, Chair. In terms of the risks, we are then commenting on how government should implement a comprehensive economic recovery strategy. And we are then noting that National Treasury should continue to support local government in the areas of funding of repairs and maintenance, Chair, because there is a lot of aging infrastructure in municipalities, and the 8% that is allocated for repairs and maintenance is not sufficient. In the areas of capacitating municipalities to reduce fruitless and wasteful expenditures, we have also encouraged municipalities to implement stringent loss control strategies, policies, and consequence management to deal with financial losses that are taking place in local government. Chair, what we are recommending, we are then recommending on the design of the comprehensive social security program that is inclusive of indigent households in municipalities to protect them against this negative global economic outlook. We are then also recommending that National Treasury notes the financial impact of these power outages and considers compensating municipalities for this unintended costs. We are also recommending that funding should be allocated for the rehabilitation of roads due to the failure in the rail system. Honorable members, we have noted in terms of the division of nationally raised revenue that local government, the budget, the MTBS has decreased allocations to local government by 3.3 billion. And we've also observed that although there are increases in terms of the MTBPS, those are marginal increases, and they are also on a downward trend, meaning that the growth diminishes over time in the outer years. Chair, as my chair has already outlined, that as a sphere of government, we are underfunded because we receive the least share of the equitable share, and this share is no longer applicable, as the assumptions of the white paper are no longer valid, as the 2020-2021 figures showed that local government can only cover 69% of their cost through their these revenues from own source and transfers. Chair, as we have noted, we welcome the 6% increase. However, we do note that the growth in the outer years, as we said, is on a downward trend. And looking at the population growth and unemployment trends, this will put pressure to municipalities to provide basic services to those communities. Chair, we want to reiterate that this issue of underfunding in terms of the powers and functions that are allocated to local government is not equitable. As my chair has outlined, that we have been tasked to do a study of the review of the local government fiscal framework as from the resolution of the local government summit. Our study is looking into identifying what is the fiscal gap in the vertical allocation, and we're looking into how much does it cost to run an ideal municipalities, and calculating the ideal percentage that should be allocated to the local government. Phase 2 of the study looks into the funding shortfall per category of municipality, and lastly, phase 3 on the equitable share formula. Chair, when coming to the implementation of the debt relief package, we do welcome a majority of the conditions that are geared to help municipalities to become financially sustainable, except for what the chair has outlined on the revocation of distribution licenses of municipalities. And we welcome National Treasury's hands-on support in terms of providing technical capabilities in those municipalities and the transversal tender that has been put out. But Chair, we do note that it is important to note that the challenges in these municipalities are still structural, and in terms of implementing these conditions, it will take time and funding. And we do say that funding should be provided for that procurement of prepaid meters and water restriction devices to enable the municipalities to meet their current account of ESCOM. Lastly, Chair, in terms of our conclusions and our recommendation, we do not accept this decrease of 3.3 billion. And we also do not accept these marginal increases that decreases over the outer years. We note that this outer years decreases ignores the current realities of local government in terms of the growing expenditures demands in those municipalities that are outpacing the eroding own revenues. Chair, we are still lamenting on the structural underfunding of local government, that there's still no equity in the allocation of the revenue, the nationally raised revenue. And Chair, we recommend that condition 1.4 be removed from the circular 124 and replaced with as section 78-77, assessment of the Municipal Systems Act. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Are we done with the presentation from SALGA? Honorable
Yeah, we are done, Honorable Chairs. We are done. We can then go to engagement if any.
Okay. Yeah. Can I allow members to raise their hands for the usual icon? But if you are unable, you can call for my attention, please. Lubabalo, you will help me with the Darren, identification of members who have raised their hands.
Okay, thank you, Chairperson. So far, we have Honorable Ryder, Chairperson.
We have Honorable Ryder.
Honorable Okam.
Chair, I want to suggest the process. Honorable Chair, Kaiso.
Okay, Honorable Ryder. And who? Honorable Kaiso.
I want to suggest the process, Chair.
Yes.
Chair, wouldn't it be better if we allow the presentation so that when we raise issues, it's a package rather than going back and forth? Maybe it will save us time, because I'm just afraid we may not have sufficient presentations.
Yeah. Also, we might not have. Honorable Ryder, you talk through the chairperson. Can I allow you now to talk? What were you saying?
Chair, sorry, I just said that I don't support that proposal. I think the chair's direction this morning is correct.
Okay. Thank you very much. Can you go to the next presentation? This will also be saving us time because we know what is happening today. So we might not have enough members to engage with the presentations as expected. And who's leading this presentation? Secretariat? Or can I just hand over to them?
Okay, thank you, Chairperson. I can assist you. Next, we are going to take Ilifa Labandwana. Daniel is going to lead the presentation. Daniel, you have the co-host rights. You can proceed. And other colleagues may prepare themselves. They also have the co-host rights already, so that we can kind of fast track the process. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Ilifa Labantwana.
Thank you very much. I'm just setting up the sharing of the screen. If you could just confirm that you can see my presentation. Is the presentation visible?
Yes.
Great. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity to present this morning, and good morning, chairpersons and honorable members. My name is Daniel McLaren. I'm from an organization called Ilifa Labantwana, and our focus is on early childhood development services. And the goal of our organization is to secure an equal start for all children living in South Africa through improved access to quality early childhood development services. So my presentation is in two parts. The first part is really just giving members a little bit of background on early childhood development and why investing in early childhood development is very important, both for fulfilling children's rights, but also for setting our country on a higher growth and more inclusive growth trajectory. So we believe that we believe in the power of investment in early childhood development to build human capital, but also to address economic and gender inequalities. So that's where I'm going to start. And then the second half of the presentation is on our reflections on the 2023 MTBPS and the DORA bill. So, honourable members, early childhood development refers to the period from conception to 5 years of age, when children experience very considerable physical, emotional, and cognitive development. And in order for children to thrive, 5 components of ECD must be in place. The first is maternal and child healthcare services. The second is adequate access to nutrition. The third is social protection, and this includes both social protection services, but also income support through the social grant system. The fourth is opportunities for early learning and early learning stimulation through early learning programs and daycare opportunities. And the fourth is support for caregivers. So as a LIFA, we see investing in children both as a human rights issue, but also as a way to fundamentally transform our economy, and something which if we neglect, we're going to continue to struggle to break the back of intergenerational poverty and inequality. So investing in ECD is investing in human capital, and human capital consists of the knowledge, skills, and health that people accumulate throughout their lives. So when we invest in children through interventions in nutrition, healthcare, quality education, job, skills development opportunities, we are developing human capital. And at an individual level, longitudinal studies show that, and every parent will know this, the more that you invest in your child through health, education, and giving them opportunities, the much better life chances they have, quality of life, but also in terms of higher incomes over their lifetime. And at a macroeconomic level, this is true where societies that invest more and more equitably in all of these aspects of human capital are associated with being higher growth and more sustainable growth economies. So it's important for us to be looking at investing more as a country in ECD for several reasons, but the most important for us really is that, and this should be shocking to us as we embark on almost 30 years of democracy, that income inequality, wealth inequality hasn't shifted since 1994, and it's actually gotten worse. The top 10% of income earners actually take a greater share of national income today than they did in 1994. And the combined income of the poorest or the bottom 50% of South Africans has actually declined as a percentage of national income. And this is also true in terms of wealth. Half the population actually have negative net wealth. So their debts actually exceed any assets in property, cars, savings, etc. And one of the biggest drivers of this inequality is our labor market. And our labor market remains very much a pyramid shaped with a huge base of unemployed and unskilled individuals, mainly unskilled, although our unemployed persons also include semi-skilled and skilled persons, but largely our base of unemployed people is unskilled. Many of them have not completed school. And this is really where we need to invest in changing the skills pyramid. And we believe that by investing in human capital, by investing in the early childhood development sector, there's huge opportunities for creating jobs, creating sustainable livelihood opportunities, but also fundamentally changing the trajectory of children, improving their chances of progressing at school, developing skills, and really being able to participate in the knowledge economy, which is the economy of today, but most certainly the economy of the future. It's also important to invest in ECD in terms of human rights, and our constitution provides what's referred to as unqualified rights to children, and these rights include basic nutrition, healthcare, social services, and education. However, as we stand today on the back of a very difficult period of COVID-19 and a period of prolonged fiscal constraint, we see that in the latest General Household Survey data, the number of children living in poverty has increased to 70%. So this is children living in households where income is less than 1,558 Rand per person per month. That's the upper bound poverty line. We also see that 1 in 4 children under 5 are stunted. And this means that they're not just right now, but their long-term cognitive, physical, and emotional development has been impacted by malnourishment. And we see the Human Rights Commission, for example, recently calling on government to declare child malnutrition and hunger a disaster in the Eastern Cape. But this applies in every province in the country. And when we look at access to early learning programs, 2/3 of our 3 to 5-year-olds have no access to daycare, to any kind of play group or early learning program. And just to look at this kind of macroeconomically, the Nobel Prize winning economist James Heckman came up with this theory, which has been widely accepted, although with one qualification, which I'll mention, which is that the investments that you make in children pay off the most at the earliest ages. So investments in basic education and higher education are obviously very important and essential, but the investments that you make in nutrition, access to healthcare, safety, income support at the earliest ages, those actually pay off the most over time. And so it's this area of spending from 0 to 5 years where the spending that you need to do, the interventions that you need to make are actually the least costly, but they pay back the most in the long run. And that's important to recognize because in South Africa, we're actually doing the opposite. So we spend only 0.3% of the budget goes to early learning, early nutrition, and support to caregivers. So if you look at early learning programs, we spend about 4 billion rand per year versus 310 billion rand on basic education or 136 billion rand on higher education. So that the point here is not just to pit either of these pools of expenditure against each other. Absolutely not. The point is to say that the returns that we are getting to our essential investments in basic education and higher education are severely limited and constrained by our failure to invest in early childhood development, because children who are arriving into the school system are malnourished, are coming from unsafe and unsupported environments, are coming from poverty. And as a result, we have this filtering through the school system whereby 4 years into the school system, when children are first tested for reading at the age of 10, 80% are unable to read for meaning. So higher investments in early childhood development can improve school readiness and really change the arc of development for children. So that's on why it's important for us to really look at ECD. The president has recognized this on a number of occasions now, recognizing that investing in ECD is a great chance to create jobs, but also to fundamentally change patterns of intergenerational poverty. But we're not seeing this reflected in the budget. And the MTBPS did not speak to children. It didn't reference children's experiences or the impact of the budget on children. And it didn't refer to early childhood development either. So our analysis of the 2023 Division of Revenue Amendment Bill is that despite the minister's pledge that the government would protect the vulnerable in its mission to stabilize the public finances, our analysis is that vulnerable children and caregivers, among other vulnerable South Africans, were not protected from the budget cuts, which have been proposed. And for us, we're looking at this in just 3 areas. The provincial equitable share, the ECD conditional grant, and interventions around nutrition. So on the provincial equitable share, as we know, this is essential for the provision of healthcare services and basic education and social services. And basic education is important for ECD because basic education took over the mandate for early childhood development in the country from DSD in 2021. So in real terms, the Division of Revenue Amendment Bill continues a trend of reducing the provincial equitable share in real terms. So the table, the figures which are in the submission and on this screen is the provincial equitable share with inflation taken account of, so in constant 2023-24 rands. And when you equalize the value of rands across years, you see that the provincial equitable share is in decline and will continue to be in decline throughout the medium-term expenditure framework proposed by Minister Godongwana. And in terms of an annual percentage change, the annual change is around minus 4.5% funding for the provincial equitable share this year and also proposed for next year. So this is concerning to us, firstly, because the MTBPS noted that the accruals by provincial government, which is really your unpaid invoices, amounted to 18.2 billion rand for 2022-23. So in a sense, one would have hoped for the budgets, all else being equal, for provincial government to increase by 18.2 billion based on the fact that this is the budget that clearly is needed because there were these accruals from 2022-23, but instead the budget has been reduced in real terms by 27 billion rand this year and next year. And we're very concerned about the impact this will have on social services, health services, education and early learning services. In regards to social services, the MTBPS spoke about cuts to transfers to nonprofits, which are really provide essential services and fill really important gaps when it comes to children's services, services to caregivers, victims of gender-based violence, for example. In healthcare, we know that this will directly translate into significant strain on healthcare budgets. And in relation to education, as I said a couple of slides ago, the kind of country's plans to improve quality of ECD, to improve access to ECD, are really impossible when education departments are so constrained, and we know as Alifa Labantwana that they're unable to fill posts, which they need to fill to manage any expansion or improvement in ECD since taking over the ECD function. It also means that any subsidies which provincial governments provide to early learning programs from the equitable share are under threat. So in terms of our recommendations, we're really calling on National Treasury, the national departments and the provinces to work together for there to be leadership from the national government side and coordinating with the provincial government side to make sure that these cuts do not impact on services. We're also recommending that Parliament, before approving these budget cuts, requires some kind of evidence from National Treasury, perhaps in the form of child's rights or human rights impact assessments, that any impacts of provincial equitable share reductions are taken account of in terms of their impacts on human rights. And we'd like to see the provincial legislatures apply scrutiny to these provincial adjustment budget speeches we'll be seeing over the next few weeks. On the ECD conditional grant, this is made up of two components, the subsidy component and the infrastructure component. We saw that the infrastructure component was reduced. This component is essential for tackling a central problem facing early learning programs, which is lack of health and safety, poor infrastructure, lack of access to resources, and an inability to register. And this grant is meant to help the 25,000 unregistered early learning programs to register. And so this cut means that there's no funding for this grant for the second 6 months of the financial year, and it effectively delays by another year the push to formalize and register and support unregistered early learning programs. The subsidy component is scheduled to increase in 2024-25, which we welcomed last year. However, what hasn't been factored into that is an increase in the value of the ECD subsidy.
My apologies, sir. I'm sorry, I didn't give you allocated time when you started.
Sure.
I should have just given the time, but my apologies. Just try to speed up the presentation because we have a number of them. We'll allocate time as others are coming.
No problem. I think just one more minute, Chair. I will wrap up. So the point. Yeah, thank you. So the point really around the subsidy is that the value of the subsidy hasn't changed from 17 Rand per child per day since 2019. We've had 4 years of inflation and it hasn't been adjusted. So we need to see a mechanism built into the Division of Revenue Bill where the ECD conditional grant subsidy component is adjusted in line either with inflation or with the costs of actually providing early learning services. So our recommendation here is to increase the ECD subsidy to 20 Rand per child per day and ultimately to 45 Rand per child per day by 2030. And I'll mention some of the benefits that these investments will bring just in wrapping up. Then just a quick point on nutrition. We agree with the Human Rights Commission that this is a national crisis that requires urgent attention. We didn't hear any thoughts or policies to address this in the MTBPS, and we're calling for a program to be introduced in 2024 to finally actually eradicate stunting in South Africa. One way to do this would be through the early learning system. We've got 43,000 early learning programs, and we could roll out a national young child nutrition program through these early learning programs, combined with an increase to the ECD subsidy, a part of which is spent on food, and an increase to the child support grant to the food poverty line. These would be concrete steps that government could take to actually tackle child malnutrition. So just in summary, Chair, when we look, we've put together a model and there's a hyperlink in the submission and presentation where we show the benefits of increased investment in ECD. And just to give you 5 highlights of that, if we invested an additional 700 million a year initially and then increasing that over the next 3 to 5 years to 2.9 billion rand a year in the ECD ecosystem. We would make substantial improvements to the skills and conditions of 200,000 mainly female, mainly Black ECD workers. We would be able to create 300,000 new job opportunities. That says 30,000, it should say 300,000. We would also, by 2030, be able to relieve childcare burdens for over 2 million caregivers. We would close the school readiness gap, and we would be able to stimulate, because all of this investment would be targeted at township and rural economies, and we would be able to substantially stimulate employment, income, skills, and investment in those communities. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Litwa. The next presentation by Zimbini Matikis from Rural Health Advocacy Project. The time is yours now, and I'll request that you go at the maximum of 7 or 8 minutes, please, so that we can accommodate everybody and the members. If you are able to go below that, it will be appreciated, but share as much information as you can. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, good morning, everyone on the call. To save time, I'll just say all protocol observed. I am Zimbini Madikiza. I'm an outreach and training coordinator at Rural Health Advocacy Project. So what I'll be just touching on is showing that we acknowledge this economic crisis. Then therefore, we need to just prioritize rural healthcare outcomes. So we know that South Africa recognizes everyone's right to health care services, including sexual and reproductive health, as outlined in Section 27 of our Constitution. And recognizing this constitutional obligation, the state allocates a share of nationally raised revenue for addressing the health needs of South African population. Then the Provincial Department of Health, in its leadership capacity, needs to make sure that there is effective and efficient coordination of funds and prioritization of the implementation of healthcare programs. For a healthier rural population and for us to actually make sure that we achieve the universal health coverage, we need a very strengthened primary health care system. A strengthened primary health care system looks like a clinic that has well capacitation of staff, that has availability of healthcare products such as test kits and medication, and together with health awareness programs for prevention of diseases. And all of this is going to be made real by a strengthened health governance, so as to have effective accountability on what measures are put in place to ensure that access to essential services is obtained by the rural communities. Following the MTBPS, we acknowledge the work by the National Department of Health to ensure that provinces would receive the additional allocations needed to fund the increase to healthcare workers as agreed earlier this year. So while the immediate provincial health funding crisis is averted, we are concerned that this will require a significant adjustment to several health programs, including the District Health Program Grant, which is your HIV and AIDS, and the Health Facility Revitalization Grant. And furthermore to this concern is that the funding of wage increases is only limited to health and education. Then provinces are expected to fund other staff increases from within existing budgets, which would likely lead to the erosion of provision of welfare services, maintenance of essential structure, and decreased work opportunities for rural communities who are solely dependent on publicly funds. So how does the future look like? South Africa is facing significant economic uncertainty. We know that, with Treasury expecting growth to remain weak And this is also seen in the global lens as well. Lower tax revenue, higher debt servicing costs, and a further public sector wage negotiations will place additional strain on already fragile health services, as further cuts to expenditure will be required. To ensure provision of healthcare services for underserved population, it will require that rural communities' essential services are prioritized. Prioritization of rural healthcare services, as I have mentioned, it needs well-functioning clinic services apho bahlala khona in their villages, so that they don't have to use le mali that they are getting through social grants to travel and go to facilities that are in the cities because they are more capacitated. I know this because I'm also a public healthcare user. I'm from Guapane, a smaller rural area just outside of Umtata. And what I still see and also experience is that young girls and women are still encountering challenges when it comes to accessing things like your family planning services, immunizations for newborns. I mean, these are the primary healthcare services that needs to be always available. So when we're prioritizing primary healthcare services, we actually mean that there must be adequate provision of these services. Community voice is very important. Because it will also assist the Department of Health and Provincial Department of Health on which essential healthcare needs are mostly needed in rural communities, because it's always identified by us, the users of these needs, so we know our needs better. So our recommendations to make it a point that we have well-coordinated budgets already. So with these limited resources, we need to make it a point that they are well coordinated. So for this to happen, we suggest that there must be a joint sitting of the Portfolio Committee of Health, Finance and Appropriations to consider the impact of budget cuts on the state's ability to meet its constitutional mandates. Also, we need provinces to present plans detailing what measures are being implemented to ensure that rural health services are protected from budget cuts. And lastly, we call the National Department of Health to outline what plans are put in place for the implementation of the national human resources. As these two documents are guiding principles on how to make it a point that everyone has got equitable access to quality healthcare services, we are saying that we acknowledge our economic climate, but what we are saying is let us really prioritize the limited resources we are having to make it a point that rural communities enjoy life. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Madam. Can we now hand over to Sike Mahunga, who's representing TB Advocacy and Accountability Consortium. Over to you, Sike.
Good morning, Honorable Chair and Honorable Members. I greet you all, and to all other attendees. Good morning. My name is Sike Mahunga, the TB Accountability Consortium Project Coordinator, which is an initiative of the Rural Health Advocacy Project. Let me just start sharing my screen. My apologies. All right, I'll be doing my submission to the Select Committee on Appropriations under the title, A Call for Coordinated Intervention. So the TB Accountability Consortium is a growing platform that is wanting to achieve elevated status and understanding and improvement ultimately of TB program outcomes. And we do this within 3 accountability framework lenses, which is political, programmatic as well as financial accountability. And we are a coalition of organizations which are housed within the Rural Health Advocacy Project, as I've mentioned. So this presentation is, essentially protecting the TB and National Health Program. And so the problem statement that we had, first established was that in the newly released World Health Organization TB report, that TB is the second leading cause of death globally, and it is following only COVID-19, and it has caused almost twice as many deaths as HIV/AIDS. And these are staggering, numbers if we're having to actually understand them within a global prospect. And this is also in addition that 3% of the global TB burden actually is actually attributed to South Africa. And so in 2021, the Department of Health set up a TB recovery plan, which is a TB program intervention to address the post-COVID care cascade loss. And it was to accelerate efforts towards attaining the National Strategic Plan of HIV/AIDS, TB, and STIs within the period of 2023 to 2028. The declarations made from the UN high-level meeting on TB and pandemic preparedness, as well as these sustainable development goals and NTB targets of 2020-30. So this recovery plan was an intervention that was in 4 key interventions: find people who have TB, treat those who have been tested for TB and put them on treatment, retain those who are already on TB treatment, and then with those who are of the exposed population, for them to be put on TB preventative therapy. So it is in find, treat, retain, and prevent, which are the 4 main elements with what this recovery plan was meant to achieve. As we have seen, obviously, within the last few years, we have the apparent fiscal constraints within our country. And so obviously, interventions such as these have obviously also had an impact, and we have seen the large-scale debt relief that has been given towards Eskom and other infrastructural, demands that have been going on within the last couple of years. So what does this mean for the case of TB? Well, as I'd mentioned within the find, treat, and care, is that there is a gap when we are understanding the people who have already been tested and found that they're on TB. So we have 85%, achievement on our TB program targets for those who have been tested. But we're finding that there is a gap that when they have been tested, they are not linked to care. We understand that from Treasury that there is a strategic decision to allocate funds to health and education, as we've seen from the MTBPS. And we also observe and acknowledge that there has been 500 million rand that has been ring-fenced for TB community outreach within these interventions. And this is part of the district health grant that can actually assist in improving of this TB care cascade. Since we are part of a rural health network, we also understand that we're needing to also focus that it's not just TB in urban areas that we're needing to focus, but a strengthened focus in TB in rural areas, as 1 in every 100 people have undiagnosed TB within these places. And so these things have a ripple-on effect of even greater proportions when we're understanding rural as a social determinant of health within these areas. This also needs political action. There is absolutely a need for political action and a move of the needle within the political will. That the Bill of Rights states, over and above the right to health care, food and water, and social security, that the right to life and inherent dignity also needs to be respected and be guaranteed for all South Africans. We also understand that through the Constitution that is enshrined, that everyone is afforded equal enjoyment of rights. And so we also understand that these rights and access to healthcare also are socially determined, that whether you live within urban areas or whether you're living within rural areas. And we're needing to understand that and understand that we're needing to have a coordinated effort to have needs for both. And we also then have said as a fourth point, that we need budget ring fencing for public health facilities. If there is meant to be this district health budget allocation, there needs to be protection of that money, and not just protection of the money, but a coordinated effort at all provincial levels for it to be doing the work that it's set out to achieve. So what can be done? The TB Accountability Consortium calls for TB to be proclaimed as a national health emergency. This TB recovery plan necessitates this linkage to care. And so we're needing to find ways in which we can move the needle to 90%. We know that a lot of these SDG high-level meeting declarations are calling for 90% achievement of these global targets. And as South Africa, we have also signed on to that. So we're needing to understand how can we better mitigate getting these to be achieved by the year 2030. There is a need for coordinated action, priority, and transparency at government level, and there being an established understanding between civil society and government within those transparency and priority setting agendas. We are calling for strengthening of community outreach with focused investment on priority districts. This recovery plan definitely has an element of targeting districts that have the highest TB burden, and we see these within the Western Cape, KZN, as well as the Eastern Cape. And so we're wanting focused investment within these districts. We see a need for community health workers that are well-trained, well-staffed clinics, and efficient collection of results. People won't know that they have TB if there are no mechanisms for them to be able to know their diagnoses. So we know that there is the means of the SMS notification system. And so we're needing all of these things to work in unison. Amidst uncertainty of future funding flows, it is essential that Parliament considers how existing publicly funded healthcare capacity is optimized and prioritizes those with the greatest of need, in particular those within rural. Our recommendations as TBAC is that the 500 million rand that has been put towards TB community outreach, that there is further monitoring at provincial level in the coordination of these resources, and as well as seeking guidance from NDOH to understand to what extent we can better utilize community health workers in this TB care cascade. We also understand that civil society has a great part in the response of TB program outcomes, and we call upon local government to partner with civil society within these program interventions. TBAC also has an implementation partner through the Treatment Action Campaign, of which they had previously called TB being a national health emergency in 2021. And so within the work that TBAC and TAC have been doing, we are calling on them to further use resources at district level through their district campaign teams that they have established in these high TB burden districts, which can assist to the better quality of access and quality of care within facilities. And we also call upon increased transparency that contribute to better outcomes. Parliament cannot do this alone. If we are wanting a bi-directional flow of information from Parliament to grassroots level, there needs to be an increased understanding of transparency and priority setting within these. And lastly, we call upon the recommendation of a joint committee to set up, to temporarily review and interrogate provincial departments of resource allocations, as I've mentioned, in terms of the district health grant allocation for the next 2 to 3 years. This will safeguard strategies that are in place to ensure that the priority healthcare services like TB and its recovery plan are protected. I thank you so much.
Thank you very much. So Sofa from Amanda Bobby, can you please make your presentation? We are all yours.
Good morning. Thank you, Honorable Chair. Honorable Chair, I have requested that my colleague is made co-host so she can assist with with the slides. I'm not sure if the committee secretaries have received my messages. If not, if they could please assist with that, that would be very helpful. Thank you.
Hi, so who must I make a co-host?
Tabisi Lemia, she's in the room.
Tabisi Lemia, okay.
Thank you.
Okay, sorted. Over to you, Tabisile.
Are you there, Chair?
Yes, I'm here.
Apologies.
We can't see anything.
Just a few seconds for Tabisile to put it up. Thank you.
Maybe we should ask Darren or Lubabalo to assist.
Okay.
Are you able to do that?
I'm ready, Chairperson. I'm assisting.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Greetings, Honorable Chair, Honorable Members, and everyone in the room. Thank you so much for allowing us yet another opportunity to come up before this committee to present our views and our members' views on the mid-term budget policy statement tabled by Finance Minister Kodongwana. My name is Chloe Oba, and I am a campaigner at Amandla Modi. Honorable members, let us begin by welcoming the extension of the 350 grant to March 2025. We also welcome the year-long extension of the Presidential Youth Employment Initiative. Next slide, please. Honorable members, ahead of the MTBPS, we demanded that VAT is not increased as previously proposed by National Treasury. We welcome the decision not to hike VAT. The marginalized millions who struggle to put food on the table would not have survived another increase in the cost of living. Next slide, please. At Amandla Modi, we are not particularly happy with the budget policy statement tabled by the minister. However, we do view the MTBPS as a crucial indicator of what's to come in 2024. And while we do welcome some of the interventions announced by the minister, a part of it is really not looking good, honorable members, because budget cuts and not so progressive measures do not speak to the needs of the people in this country. Honorable members, this committee has shown multiple times that it is capable of pushing for progressive and inclusive interventions that lift millions out of poverty and move the country forward. Speaking of this, we are reminded of the time when Honorable Buthelezi was very proud to say that this committee played a huge role in getting the 350 grant extended to this day. So we want this committee to think deeply about how the decision has impacted millions of people in a positive way and see it as an indication that this committee is very much capable and can and must do better. Unfortunately, honorable members, a significant part of the MTBPS tabled by the minister is holding this committee back and the people as well. Our biggest fight is not necessarily with this committee, but with how far this committee can go to hold National Treasury accountable for its austerity budget. Next slide, please. Just to paint a picture of how heartbreaking the living conditions are for the majority of our people in Mzansi, our presentation today centers everything that is wrong with Treasury's budget and statements, including the previous ones, around pensioners whom we usually refer to as gogos and whom this committee is very much familiar with. Next slide, please. Honorable members, 34% of triple generation households in South Africa are headed by pensioners. Because South Africa has an excruciating level of unemployment, pensioners often carry the burden of taking care of their children and grandchildren with their old age funds. Next slide, please. So when we look at health and education, in his February budget, Finance Minister Kodongwana allocated 259 billion to public health care. This budget was further reduced in his MTBPS by 24 billion. South Africa is already struggling with a shortage of healthcare practitioners, and public hospitals are overcrowded. They need more resources and face medicine shortages. While more money was allocated for wage costs in the education sector, the budget for education is not being increased, with 1.7 billion reduced for school infrastructure. Cutting funding for health and education sectors is a form of violence towards millions who rely on public services. These cuts further exacerbate poor health and inequality. Next slide, please. Now, honorable members, the pensioner Ugogo Ekai will likely be unable to access as many free public health services like he used to because the National Treasury cut the budget for public health, and she will likely need more money to get the services. If there's a lack of doctors, it means Gogo might have to pay more for transport, need more transport money because she has to travel to a clinic twice. We want this committee to think about what it means for people in a household that depends on a pensioner who has to put food on the table, that son or daughter who is looking at Gogo to provide cash for transport to go look for a job or go to a job interview. The grandchildren who are looking at Gogo to eat before and after school and to get school supplies like school uniforms because National Treasury and schools can no longer provide resources as needed. This is all dependent on a pensioner because her grant money is the highest income in the home, but still not enough. Next slide, please. Again, honorable members, there's nothing new here. As we have said many times before, the current social grant amounts are not enough to keep up with the cost of living. The grant system has also deteriorated. We have seen with the Gogos left stranded in the course of September and October this year because of grant glitches that left some still unpaid till today. The 350 grant, on the other hand, the budget has been reduced from 40 billion rand in 2022 to 34 billion currently. The grant is still very poorly administered. Exclusionary regulations are working extra time to push people out of the grant. Next slide, please. Now, honorable members, we want you to think about that young man or woman who was rejected for the 350 grant, although they qualify for it. That young woman who will have to take from the child support grant for basics and rely on Gogo's grant for the rest. That child who already does not have enough money to meet all their monthly needs because the child support grant is not enough. The household that has no single income other than a grant. The pensioner who has to carry the burden and close the gap. Honorable members, is the MTBP as tabled by Minister Godongwana something that is considerate of these people? Next slide, please. Moving on to PS and PYEI, it is disappointing that the year-long extension of the PYEI comes at the expense of other social intervention programs under the Presidential Employment Stimulus, with money redirected to fund the extension. It remains unclear on the members which of the
I need someone to help me. Oh, it looks like it's gone again. I want to pay. You are not here. It's gone again.
Sorry, Honorable Chair, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, shall I continue?
Please do.
Chairperson.
Chair, I think you're the one who doesn't hear her.
Chairperson.
I can hear her.
Chairperson.
Yes, sir.
Can I suggest that Mr. Siopa switch off the video? Okay.
Oh, okay.
Okay, thank you. I will continue. As I was saying, that youth organizations such as Youth Capital are actively advocating for ongoing funding for the PES because unemployed youth rely on that for money and work experience to increase their employability in an already challenging environment where 8 in 10 unemployed young people have never had a job. Next slide, please. Now, honorable members, I want you to think about, if you could please go to the next slide. Thank you. That young person who is or who will be out of a job because the contract has ended. What have they got now? Experience is not going to put food on the table because they're waking up tomorrow and they don't have a job anymore. So now think about what does this mean for a pensioner who once again has to carry that burden with a social grant that is meant to take care of them as senior citizens. What about that household that has no pensioner? We call on this committee to investigate further what other programs have been cut off and to encourage the Presidency and National Treasury to find the money to continue funding the stimulus package. Next slide, please. Honorable members, it is encouraging that the Minister has mentioned plans for more taxes in the next budget to help raise revenue. We again reiterate and present to you the need for a wealth tax in this country. SARS has since done a good job identifying and tracking individuals who have evaded tax. We once again call on this committee to urge National Treasury to implement the following taxes, which is increasing PIT for people earning over 1 million annually and introducing an annual net worth tax. Honorable members, we understand that this committee deals with how the pie is cut during budgets. Every time National Treasury opts for austerity, it compromises this committee's credibility in ensuring the most deserving get justice. This committee must hold National Treasury accountable for not introducing more effective taxes that will raise revenue to help close the poverty gap. Next slide, please. With that being said, honorable members, if I were to ask how much a loaf of bread is, I'm wondering if anyone could come up with the price at the top of the head right now. Now, if the greedy rich in this country paid a bit more tax, they wouldn't be unable to still afford their luxurious lives. More taxes could allow more interventions such as increases in social grants and job creation, so that Ugogo and her children can at least afford to buy bread and meals for abazili balal balhili. We call on this committee to encourage the National Treasury to tax the rich. Next slide, please. Honorable members, earlier this year, Treasury was inundated with budget tips calling for social grant increases, introducing a basic income grant, and taxing the greedy more. Treasury decided against these demands, so we asked for the evidence and information that was used to make these decisions. National Treasury was ordered to provide the information during Finance Committee's public hearings in March this year. Our follow-ups with both the Finance Committee and Treasury were completely ignored. So in October, we sent a prior request to National Treasury to provide research evidence behind their decision not to tax the rich more and increase social grants. We were supposed to have received the response of the prior before the MTBPS, but National Treasury requested an extension, blaming it on the preparations for the MTBPS. We still do not have the information we requested. It is alarming that National Treasury cannot readily provide information they use to make decisions. Does this mean that decisions that impact millions of lives are not evidence-based? We urge this committee to step in and hold National Treasury accountable for its failure to provide information timely. Next slide, please. And finally, our honorable members, hundreds of thousands of Amandla Dogmobi members have signed different petitions with different demands in the people's best interest. A fraction of those demands have been implemented, but the victories have since been undermined by the continuous austerity budgets and measures that have taken the country steps back. Unfortunately, it is the marginalized majority who feel the consequences of these setbacks. Honorable members, we tasked this committee to hold National Treasury accountable and force them to put the marginalized majority first with the budgets tabled every year. Thank you, Honorable Chair. That's it from us.
Thank you very much, Amanda Mobi. I'll now hand over to Matshidiso Lenkosa, Section 27. Over to you, Matshidiso.
Thank you, Chair. I will just start my screen sharing now.
Slide mode.
Yes, so I'm just trying to click it over the Zoom thing. Okay, I hope you can all see it. Thank you. Good morning. Good morning, Honorable Chair, Honorable members, and everyone in attendance. So my name is Matshidiso Lenkosa, and I will be doing Section 27's presentation on the Division of Revenue Amendment Bill. So I will just jump right into it to say that our country is experiencing a weak economic outlook, and it is the most impoverished people who are feeling it the most. There have been reports of children starving to death in many parts of the country, acute malnutrition, and underpaid, overworked government nurses, staff, including nurses, who have been taking proceeds out of their, or funds out of their own pockets to mask the gap of the under-resourced systems. It is clear that now more than ever do the most underserved communities in our country need budget policies that protect their constitutional rights. It is difficult to achieve this, though, in the context of these harsh nominal budget cuts. So these budget cuts, coupled with the cost containment measures that have been implemented by Treasury, are constraining the province's ability to provide quality public services, and it is the most marginalized people who suffer the most from this. So we're Section 27, and we're a public interest law center that works on advancing socioeconomic rights in the country, particularly the right to basic education and the right to access healthcare services. And as such, our presentation will be centered around that. So we submit that the nominal cuts to healthcare programs and healthcare conditional grants are constraining the funding that's available to bolster our public health system, to provide quality services for the rising number of uninsured people and the increasing cost of these services. We further submit that these nominal cuts to basic education are worsening education outcomes and challenge the ability of schools to overcome overcrowding and to fix these schools that are made of inappropriate materials. We further submit that there's chronic underspending in the provinces that also threatens these rights. However, reducing spending as a response to that may only worsen this for people in the country. Lastly, we argue that these severe budget cuts have implications for gender equity in the country. We'd like to reiterate our recommendations from earlier this year when we made the submission on the Division of Revenue Bill, which is for calling for transparent and participatory human rights impact assessments to be made to underpin budget decisions. We also call for urgent intervention to overcome underspending, and we feel that cutting spending is not that urgent, it's not an intervention to overcome that. We also continue our call for a workshopping gender-responsive budgeting guidelines to be made public. So speaking of gender-responsive budgeting, so we've already spoken at length in our earlier submission to this commission and in previous years on gender, on how public service cuts to public services impact women disproportionately. And we're pleased that this committee had advanced those recommendations regarding gender-responsive budgeting and the necessity. So I'll just go over this quite quickly. Just to remember that our country has a triple challenge of poverty, inequality, and unemployment. And that triple challenge is not gender neutral. So we see that in poverty is women-led households who are bearing the burden of poverty more so disproportionately. It is also young Black women who are reported as the face of unemployment in this country. And of course, we have gender inequality that results in where we have unequal gender norms that place the burden of care on women in the country. And so any proposed cuts to the budget have gendered implications. So, okay.
The host, can you please mute the open mics? And members who request that, and all participants, you mute your mic if you're not on the platform. Over to you, Masidi, so you can continue.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So we reiterate our call for gender-responsive budgeting because we see it as a powerful intervention to redress this triple challenge of that we've explained in the country, and also to liberate women who feel compelled to stay in abusive relationships out of financial insecurity. We also call on Parliament to remember that when we do have budget cuts, it is women in this country who fill the gap of these cuts through our unpaid care work. So like to move on to the provincial equitable share. So we welcome the adjustment of 17.6 billion that has been made to support the public sector wage agreement, which I'll explain in the next section. But we need to remember that this is still a real term cut of 1.7%, which even though it is an improvement from the original proposed amount. We urge Parliament to consider human rights impact assessments and to foreground human rights in the decisions regarding the provincial equitable share allocation. We also explain that these cuts have impacts on school children, in particular, those who are attending fee-free schools. We have found that there are delays in the delivery of stationery and textbooks in many parts of the country, particularly in the Eastern Cape. And we've heard of reports of schools making photocopies of their textbooks so that they can fill this gap. And also there are reports that we've seen on the ground that schools are using other conditional grants like school nutrition, the NSNP, to cover the shortfall, which is unsustainable because it also has impacts on other constitutional rights like the right to nutrition. So moving on to personnel funding. So we've covered this extensively also in our original submission. So I'll just jump to the response to the Division of Revenue Amendment adjustment. We welcome that there have been adjustments made to the public sector wage bill. However, we caution that there's been a significant conversation around the public sector wage bill and how there needs to be a reduction of it, but we implore Parliament and the country at large to consider the socioeconomic strife of unemployment, poverty, and inequality in our country when engaging on the public sector wage bill, but also to recognize the gender responsiveness and to look at it from a gender responsive lens, recognizing that over 70% of teachers and over 90% of nurses in the country are actually women, and public sector healthcare and education are drivers of inclusive economic growth and are opportunities to create decent work for women, especially women in rural and underserved communities. So I will then move on to basic education funding, the conditional grants, but to say that to paint the context, to remind Parliament and everyone who's listening that there are still many learners in the country who are attending schools that are built of inappropriate materials, that are unsafe and overcrowded, and we need to address this urgently. However, the budget cuts that are proposed, we are of the view that they threaten this progress because they reduce the available resources to schools to achieve this. We are also concerned that there have been large-scale cuts to programs like the HIV/AIDS Life Skills Grant, the Math, Science and Technology Grant, and school infrastructure in general. And these cuts, nominal cuts, are quite huge. They are 11.5%, which cause further constraint on resources. We recognize that we are in a global economic system that is underpinned by trade-offs, difficult trade-offs, but we reiterate that it cannot be learners, a school education that is invested, because it will likely have consequences right now in the immediate term, but also in decades to come. We see this first with the school nutrition program. So the NSNP, we are relieved that it has not received the same severe budget cuts as the infrastructure programs or other programs of social spending. However, we reiterate that the value of the NSNP is being eroded by food inflation, which is significantly higher than CPI inflation, and it has been so historically, and I'm sure everyone on this call would know that, there's also a cost of living crisis, and as I mentioned earlier, that there are reports of acute malnutrition, particularly in the Eastern Cape. It's also crucial to note that the school nutrition program is the only source of a nutritious meal for many daily for many learners in the country, and so any breakdown to the NSNP will likely cause further social vulnerability and food insecurity. In this light, we extend the recommendations made by the South African Human Rights Commission on coordinating between the Department of Social Development and the Department of Basic Education to find areas of underspending. Instead of returning funding to National Treasury for fiscal consolidation, this funding should be done to scale the NSNP, to extend it to weekends, to holidays, as well as to ECD centers. We also recommend bolstering and monitoring and investing in monitoring efforts to improve the NSNP or risk the gains of this crucial program being lost. And we've seen this already with the implementation in KZN and Eastern Cape, the crises that happened. So for education infrastructure, we're concerned that there have been reversals to the allocation on the EIG because many provinces rely solely on the EIG for their capital projects. And so when you cut the EIG in the way that has been proposed in the Division of Revenue Amendment Bill, it leaves many schools with far fewer resources and the means to address poor school sanitation and infrastructure. This is particularly pronounced as we are seeing an increasing occurrence of extreme weather events in the country. And so it is the most marginalized schools that are most affected because those schools are already built of inappropriate materials and makes education attainment actually a dangerous exercise in the country. We've previously spoken on the underspending, particularly in the Eastern Cape and Mpumalanga, and we call on urgent intervention on that, but we also call on Parliament to remember that reducing the quantum of spend reduces the available resources to invest in capacity building to improve this quality of spending and actually translate into the realization of this right to basic education. This is seen also in the school infrastructure backlog grants, which we have critiqued in the past for its poor spending performance. However, it is still crucial in the country to have adequate funding to eradicate pit toilets, of which there are still many in this country. The bill does attribute this cut to the underspending, but it doesn't explain how we will overcome that. And that is something that we have a concern, we're concerned about as Section 27. I will then move on to healthcare also, just in the interest of time, to say that overall healthcare expenditure, we are concerned that this real-term cut underestimates the healthcare needs in the country and what it takes to equip the health system to meet these needs. Even the MTBPS has acknowledged that healthcare investment is likely to be eroded by inflation and rising demand for public services, but doesn't explain how the right to access quality healthcare services will be protected in light of these decisions. We are particularly concerned about HIV/AIDS funding, the 1 billion rand that's been proposed as a cut, because we feel that it may regress the country's progress on ensuring that that 6 million people are on antiretroviral treatment by the end of this financial year. This cut goes against the NSP priority action, as well as our 95-95-95 targets. And so South Africa has committed to these, like many other countries that have the HIV/AIDS epidemic. But unlike Rwanda and Botswana and many other countries, we are struggling to meet the second goal, which is to provide antiretroviral treatment to 95% of people who are diagnosed. In fact, the poorest performing province, being Limpopo, is still only at 62%. So the Department of Health has attributed the potential savings from acquiring ART at a cheaper rate, but we recommend that this funding be redirected towards scaling up ART coverage to allow more people in this country who have HIV to live fuller lives, and for us to overcome this epidemic that is draining resources that could be used to, it has implications on GDP as well. So we are also concerned that healthcare infrastructure, there's been a downward adjustment of 440 million rand on it, and that this is an indiscriminate cut. So each province is receiving the same cut of 6%. We see that in the context of a scale or moving towards the NHI, with climate change destroying clinic facilities and an acknowledged healthcare infrastructure backlog. Now is not the time to be cutting on healthcare and infrastructure. We should be investing more in so. And so I will conclude to remind Parliament and to remind everyone that the UN had recommended that our country increases its level of funding and investments in healthcare and education to overcome that triple challenge that we have explained, particularly inequality, which continues to plague and haunt our country. We note that it is crucial for government to heed this call, particularly for these underserved communities in our country. And we call on Parliament to see the Division of Revenue Bill and amendments to it as a means to proactively alleviate the hardships that people in our country are facing, rather than worsening these hardships. We also would like to reiterate our call for investment in capacity building and consequence management, rather than punishing learners and healthcare users in provinces that underspend, as this underspending only threatens the realization of constitutional rights of the intended beneficiaries in the country. So yeah, I'd like to say thank you. And I'll stop sharing my screen.
Thank you very much. I'll now hand over to Comrade Matthew Parks, Congress of South African Trade Unions, to make a presentation, and Co-Chairperson Shenge will take over from here after the presentation. Thank you so much. Matthew?
Good morning, Chair. Good morning to members. Hope you are feeling well, Chair. Let me just share our presentation quickly. Yeah. So no, thanks, Chair. Thanks to members for giving us space as always. I know you're under time pressure, Chair, so I'll try to also assist in that regard. I think, Chair, we had really looked forward, to a bold and decisive MTBS at Parliament, including the DORA bill, and we really do feel that tragedy didn't rise to the occasion. Instead of, giving us quite a decisive budget adjustments, which would have given relief to the poor, rebuild the state, stimulate the economy, etc. Instead, we felt we really got an underwhelming accounting exercise with what we fear are some reckless cuts to some of our key frontline service departments in the MTBS, but also we fear over the MTF period as well. Chair, I think for us, it's about, are we going to continue along this trajectory of a 1% GDP growth? And do we expect things to improve at that level? And we're not going to do it by whichever ideological vantage point you take. We have a multiplicity of crises from our tepid economic growth. It's now 41% unemployment and 60% youth unemployment. The cancers of crime and corruption, the rising levels of poverty and inequality, the real difficulties of experience of load shedding, the real crisis affecting Transnet and Metro Rail and the ports and so on, the rise of dysfunctional municipalities. And we didn't get a sense of what are the interventions in the MTBS and the DORA bill, which will help to address these real challenges facing us. Instead, it seems that Treasury is convinced that if we stick with business as usual, somehow we'll get different results, and we're not convinced why would business as usual change things. Chair, we've often had a lot of noise about the wage bill, and obviously that has an impact upon provincial government and also municipal government. But yet, 2020, Treasury imposed a wage freeze in the public service. There's been below inflation increases since that time. Yet the fiscus and the economy remain in a crisis. In fact, it's getting worse in many instances because we've not addressed the fundamental obstacles to growing the economy, like load shedding, fixing Transnet, fixing municipalities, etc. Chair, I think we were quite worried in the run-up to the MTBS to see some, what we feel are misguided austerity budget cuts across departments, freezing vacancies and infrastructure investments. We do appreciate the fiscal constraints facing the state and the need to reprioritize to cut expenditure, but you need then a surgical approach, not a blunt instrument. Otherwise, what you do is that you choke an economy needing stimulus and you really actually weaken public services that society and including the economy depend upon. If we can grow the economy, that's how we're going to enable us to be in a sustainable debt path trajectory. There's been a lot of political noise, Chair, about the wage bill. We really think this is a deflection. It's a lazy scapegoat exercise, doesn't address our multiplicity of crises. And if you pickpocket a nurse, sure, you can do that, but that's not going to get the trains to run on time. But what it does is to fuel the brain drain of skilled public servants like doctors and nurses, police officers, teachers, to better paying, less stressful jobs overseas or in the private sector. And we can see a real escalation in that regard. Some would say, well, the public service is bloated. Yet if one goes to the facts, in 1994, we had 34 million South Africans, 1 million public servants. Today, the population has basically doubled to 62 million, yet the public service headcount is about 1.2 million with about 70,000 vacancies. So the ratio is actually deteriorating rapidly, and that's having a huge impact upon queues at hospitals, at home affairs, the quality of teaching, etc. So, Chair, we don't have an expenditure crisis, we have a revenue crisis. Some will say, well, the wage bill is out of control. It's alarming. Okay, let's go to the MTBS, and the MTBS is quite actually refreshingly honest. It says the wage bill as a portion of the budget has decreased in the last few years from 35 to 31%. So where exactly is the wage bill crisis? The crisis we have, Chair, is a Transnet crisis, and that's leading to a collapse in company tax. And again, this is the MTBS stats. It's because of the impact of Transnet upon mining, manufacturing, agricultural sectors, major earners to the state of company taxes, of revenue for the economy, of investment, etc. So we do appreciate at times you would need to adjust the budget, and there are some positive things. For example, the adjustment for the wage agreement, some additional allocations to provincial government, etc.
But we don't think it's correct to again say, well, the budget adjustment is because of the wage agreements. If those wage agreements are dealt with before the budget cycle, then you wouldn't need to have this adjustment. We hope that the efforts by government to rebuild collective bargaining and trust and multi-year agreements will help to give some certainty to everybody. We do welcome the allocations, Chair, of about 1.6 billion rand for damage from the natural disasters. But there is some concern about cuts to provincial government of about 6 billion rand and cuts to municipal infrastructure of about 2.9 billion rand. Chair, we're quite worried about what's the impact upon these. If you look at some of the departmental allocations to provincial governments, some of them are quite alarming. So basically for basic education, we're cutting investment in infrastructure by 1.6 billion rand, the school backlog by almost 179 million rand, ECD infrastructure by 58 million rand. Healthcare, again, district health programs, basically the HIV/AIDS programs cutting by 1 billion rand, and 440 million rand to health facilities revitalization. We all speak about giving support to emerging farmers, fine, but then we're cutting the budget allocations. We have a huge crisis of housing, especially in the former areas. Yet we're basically cutting the budget for housing development by about 2.2 billion rand and informal settlement upgrades by nearly 800 million rand. And again, Chair, we speak about the quality of roads and the impact that has upon businesses, upon industry, etc. But we're cutting it by about 1.1 billion rand. We have a crisis of electrification, and again, we're cutting it by 500 million rand. In addition to our electricity crisis, our number one other crisis is a water scarcity. And again, we know the amount of water leakages we experience in many municipalities, but we're cutting the allocation there by about 500 million rand. But yet, so DOLA is a bit difficult because it doesn't give you what are the reasons for some of these cuts, what's the impact, is it a failure to spend money? And then if it is, what are the measures being put in place to capacitate municipalities to spend money? We have seen that at times in many municipalities. It doesn't speak about what are the impact upon service delivery and what are the kind of mitigation measures that are being put in place. It's simply just an accounting exercise. Chair, I think we all know the horror story that is now masquerading as local government, where a decade ago about 10% of municipalities were in financial distress. Today it's close to 200 out of the 259 municipalities are real financial trouble. We've seen about, sorry, I've got wrong stats here, apologies. It's about 36 municipalities which now are routinely failing to pay staff or transfer deductions in about 6 provinces. We don't see what are the measures to try to turn that around. We know the issue that Salgo would correctly raise about resident-owned municipalities, about 280 billion rand. And of course, the spillover effect to Eskom, where money owed to Eskom is just under 60 billion rand. And of course, there's a real deterioration in the quality of basic services being provided, the indigent grants not being allocated, subsidies, etc. And the consequence is companies are closing many rural towns, plunging them further into poverty. We know about the issues of corruption in local government, yet throughout the DOLA bill or the MTBS, you don't see what exactly is a plan to address it. We hear PowerPoints about a district development model, but we don't see much action. So Chair, just for the benefit of members, and I won't need to go through it, I just highlighted the 36 municipalities continuously failing to pay staff. Eastern Cape, Free State really are leading from the front in that regard. Mfuleni from Gauteng has joined. There's a few in Limpopo as well, consequently because of the merge of those municipalities. The Northern Cape and the Northwest too have been real problem areas. And again, you'll see these are municipalities which are routinely struggling, especially in the Northwest, where, like, for example, Ditsabotla, you have a complete collapse of local government, Mamusa, etc., Naledi. These are always in the papers for the wrong reasons. Chair, our issue is that if we really want to resolve all our budgetary issues, we have to fix Transnet, we have to grow the economy, reduce unemployment. We have to make sure that businesses can operate. That's going to give the state the revenue it needs to provide the funding for provincial, for local government, etc. Chair, and of course, we have seen some good progress on the Eskom front. And again, it's about how can we give more support to Eskom. And that's why the cuts to electrification are quite concerning. And again, we need to see more interventions around Transnet and PRASA because that has a huge impact upon the state of provincial economies. And Transnet really has to be our number one crisis. And then just getting to the end, Chair, again, the point about dysfunctional municipalities, what exactly is the plan? And we don't really see one. We do welcome the debt relief given to various municipalities, but if we don't accompany that with capacity building interventions, in a year's time, those same municipalities will be back asking for help. Treasury members will be correct to ask where will you get the money from for all these demands. We think the simple thing is to invest in SARS, give SARS all the support and resources it needs to tackle tax evasion, and perhaps SARS could also assist municipalities around their own municipal rates compliance challenges too. But we have seen with SARS real progress from taking us from a 61 to 64 tax compliance rate, giving us an additional 60 billion rand of taxes owed to the state, which is just simply saying how can we assist SARS to get to a 70% tax compliance rate. That will help to plug the fiscal loopholes or gaps. Chair, we also think if we were serious about dealing with issues of service delivery, of tackling crime, corruption, we should be filling vacancies in the public service, especially frontline institutions. And Chair, we'd also, if we're serious about tackling structural unemployment, we should actually be expanding the presidential employment program to help accommodate at least 2 million young people enter the labor market, gain experience, earn a salary, gain the confidence to find work longer term. And of course, our point about expanding the SOD grant to help it adjust for the inflation erosion, and of course the need to invest in infrastructure and so forth. So, Chair, I think basically if we can address these kind of bold interventions, we do think we can grow the economy by 4%, and that's going to give the state the revenue it needs to fill the fiscal holes, rebuild public services, and then again it's going to boost the economy because businesses depend upon that as well, workers depend upon it. But what we can't have, Chair, is simply a business as usual approach and somehow to expect different results for the same interventions. But of course, Chair, we will continue to, as COSATU, to engage with government because we do want to see government succeed, we want to see businesses grow, and if we can do that, then of course jobs will be created and many challenges will be addressed. So let me stop there, Chair, and hope I didn't take too much time. Thanks very much, Chair, members.
Thank you so much to all the presenters. Good morning, honorable members from both the Standing Committee and Select Committee on Appropriations. I think we've had quite good presentations from the different members of the public. Before I allow you to come in, honorable members, I think I must make this comment that for me, and I'm sure for you, it's really gratifying to see young people taking community issues up. As you can see that most of the things that they were raising, it's about what affects their communities. So we're seeing a situation where as families and as the society, we are seeing returns on investments. Usually people talk about things which affect them, but all the presentations that were made today, it's about what affect the greater society, especially the most marginalized, the young people, the children who can't speak for themselves, the ECD case, the rural communities, and so on and so forth. We really appreciate that. And I think having said that, I will then, let me also thank Honorable Chair, Dikeleti Mahlangu, for having chaired the first session. Thank you very much, Honorable Chair. Honorable members, I will be taking hands and allow you to come in, but I'll really request that you be brief, straight to the point, so that you can give enough time to other honorable members who are two committees today, and again allow the presenters to engage with the issues that you have raised. I won't give you time, honorable members, but I know that you are able to manage yourselves. Can I get indications? Let me look at the hands. I see Honorable Sheikh, I see Honorable Ryder, I see Honorable Ockham. Okay, let me start. We'll be monitoring the hands. I see Honorable Kaiso. Let's start in that order. Honorable Sheikh Imam, please come in, straight to the point.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Thank you for that. Allow me to thank all our colleagues for the different presentation. But one thing is common from all of them. All of you are raising concerns about the budget cuts and the impact it's going to have on the delivery of services. And like our chairperson has alluded to the fact that your commitment is appreciated, and particularly since you are the eyes and ears of our people on the ground. But I want to say something to you that maybe many of you don't know. And perhaps now that you will know about it, perhaps we can work together.
Honorable Sheikh Imam.
Yes,
Honorable Sheikh Imam. Please just adjust your screen. The people of South Africa want to see you. Good.
Oh, thank you very much for that. Sorry, Chair. Yeah. So one of the things is that I do agree with you. Tuberculosis, you can, align it with the levels, high levels of poverty. We're talking about rural health. There's not much development from the rural perspective. I must agree with COSATU. What you need is economic growth, more job creation. Otherwise, you're not going to solve. The revenue is down. And it's going to continue coming down by the looks of it with the energy impact and things. Now, do all of you realize, particularly those that are working in rural communities or on the ground with the people, you appreciate that revenue is down. Somewhere you've got to cut. As much as it's wrong, it's not acceptable, they're going to have to cut down. So the people on the ground suffer. Do you know that this country loses an approximately 40% in this country annually on goods and services? And that is as a result of goods that cost 10 rand that is now, through starting from local government election, through the tenders and procurement, is then contracts. I've just heard yesterday, Chairperson, something I've never had a chance to talk to you about, how in one particular municipality, every contract that is being given now is being given to the highest bidder. So what I'm trying to ask is to my colleagues there, can you work together with us so that we take control of every municipality, make sure we cut down that corruption completely? And I promise you, even the budget cuts is not going to affect the services that we want to deliver, like you correctly alluded to. So I'm looking forward to some level of engagement with you on that, since you are on the ground and in touch with all the different municipalities and things. The other question I want to ask is that there are a lot of contributing factors to why we live in a society. Like, I give you a good example. Look at last year. 91,000 children gave birth to children. What do you believe we need to do about this? Shouldn't there be a holistic approach to dealing with the challenges we have from grassroots level? It's easy to come here and blame the police force. Police can't be everywhere all the time. You saw the statistics this morning. If you take the Western Cape alone, there are police stations every quarter. You find the crime rate is just increasing. Murder rate is increasing. So that's the problem. Should we not deal holistically? I'm pleading with, in a way, can we not do more by communicating, understanding better what the problems are on the ground? So that's the second thing that I wanted to raise with you. Now the issue is on the wage bill. And yes, I know there is concerns being raised that we have a very high wage bill, and our public sector is the highest paid in the world, I've been told. And we think we need the unions to work with us to ensure that we get value for money. And value for money, number two, that those that are capacitated are employed there. And perhaps if the unions can sit down with us and say, let's do what they do in Ireland, where an independent body will employ everybody. No politician, political party will have nothing to do with that. If you can work with us as far as trying to achieve that, we'll have a more capacitated governance structures all over the company. Will you be able to assist us? And then I want to say to COSATU, what can you do in working with us in terms of economic growth on dealing with the high cost of doing business, the high levels of imports into the country, which is shutting down the manufacturing industry, which is costing more and more jobs? Let me stop there for now, Chair, and we'll deal with other issues later. Thank you.
Please, next to Honorable Ryder, please come.
Thank you very much. Morning, everybody. Thank you for the time taken with the presentations. Starting with Salga, Ms. Pasha, you mentioned that consultation is insufficient and ineffective. We hear this often from many local government entities, municipalities, but when it comes from SALGA as organized local government, it's incredibly concerning. We are repeatedly told about the excellent functioning of the budget forum, but clearly you don't feel the same. I'd like you to just unpack that and perhaps tell us about how the balance of power works in the budget forum and how you feel that there's insufficient consultation, because we are always assured that there is sufficient consultation and opportunity. Ms. Pasha also obviously voiced dismay at the reductions. I wrote that early on, where in fact it was the reductions were rejected entirely by SALGA. Specifically as the select committee, I think we need to note that quite strongly. Ms. Pasha, I urge you to watch a recording on YouTube of last night's appropriations meeting, Select Committee on Appropriations, where Treasury made the following claim. They said that there's actually an oversupply of Treasury programs to support local government. They said that they go out of their way and they do so much to help local government, and in fact that it's actually just a political problem that's stymieing service delivery, etc., at local government level, and the ability to spend money. So I'd like you to comment perhaps on that. It's perhaps unfair before you've watched the recording, but yeah, perhaps you can tell us about all of these amazing programs that Treasury runs and how much of a difference it makes in local government. There's also been a number of instances of switching of grant funding from direct grant funding to indirect, effectively removing the spending from local government and centralizing it back into national government. I didn't note a comment from you on that. Perhaps you can pick up from our queue. And then, of course, yeah, I think that you make the point that we all find is that the funding model needs to be reevaluated. You specifically pointed to the white paper, which made certain assumptions which have not come to fruition, and yet we consider or we continue to blunder down the same path. Those are the inputs really for SALGA. The rest of the presentation I'll touch on very briefly. I think rural health advocacy project, well done on a good presentation. I enjoyed it. Perhaps if I can ask the co-chair Matlangu to mute while I'm talking, it will help all of us, I believe. The rural health advocacy project, I enjoyed your presentation. Thank you for that. The one point that you made is the big difference and the variations in the cost of providing health in different environments, and I think particularly obviously with a focus on the more rural provinces from your perspective. It actually ties in with some research I did the other day on equitable share per capita for the provinces, and it's quite alarming to see, and it's an interesting exercise, colleagues, to go and have a look at the equitable share if you break it down per capita using the recent census numbers. And one looks at the huge variance there, where the Northern Cape ends up getting approximately 30,000 Rand per head, just on a simple per capita basis. Most other provinces get between 8,000 and 10,000 Rand per annum per head. And then the Northwest gets only 4,000. It seems a bit strange, perhaps. As we unpack the division of revenue, perhaps Treasury can guide us a little bit on these big discrepancies in terms of that. TB accountability, I think that your presentation is noted. I think that a lot of it has very little, a lot of your recommendations have very little impact on what we can do or on what we can decide here from a finance point of view. I think a lot of it is, or an appropriations point of view, a lot of it is more, should be more aimed at the health department and perhaps helping them to reevaluate their programs Yes, I think that in terms of putting together through the BRRR process in the National Assembly committees, perhaps you can advocate a bit more strongly there, but direct engagements with the health department is probably a better idea there. Yeah. And then Kasatu spoke. The only real comment I want to make there about the district development model, saying that there's no action. Mr. Parks, I think once one sees an ideology is failing, it's a good thing when one steps away from that ideology. So we shouldn't bash Treasury too much for not speaking about the district development model. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Ocamp and Honorable Kaiso. Just allow me to allow Honorable Mahlangu to come in before you. She's having some challenges where she is. Honorable Chairperson, please come in.
Thank you so much for your indulgence, Chairperson, and your understanding. Chair, I'll start with Salka. I just want to get a difference. Oh God, a difference in as far as the recommendation that Salka is doing on comprehensive social security between that and the existing social compact, which the national government has already in place. And I think this is targeting to the vulnerable people. They are the ones who are benefiting from that compact. We talk to social grants, basic services, social relief of the as a grant. So I want to know if I can get clarity in as far as the difference on what they are recommending with what is already in place. Still on Salga, Chairperson. I also want Salga to assist us as a committee to know what is it that they are doing to assist the national government to fast track the energy and logistic reforms to extend the economy, to address unemployment, poverty, and equality at local government. Because everything is done at local government. You are at the call, but what is it that you're doing coming from your side? And Honorable Ryder said something about yesterday's meeting. We were focusing on most of or the better parts of the discussion were on local government, the importance of local government, and also the issues that have been raised as far as the cuts are concerned. To all the presenters, all what we have recommended in as far as the social relief fund, it's not new to the community, the two committees. Maybe if I can, encourage you and with you to visit our reports that committees we present to the houses. We have been considering your inputs and inputs of other that came from other stakeholders, but also ourselves as committees on applications. We know how much this will make a difference to our constituencies. We have been, advocating, taking your recommendations on serious to say there needs to be a review in terms of the SRD, a review in a sense of making it permanent if possible, because we recommend, but also we ask ourselves a question, because we have engagements with FSC and PBO to seek a consultation, so that when we engage with Treasury, we don't just make demands, but we propose solutions or processes
in terms of what they can do. And I think on Ifalabantwana, a very important organization, not to say that others are not important, but as the committee, I think we should welcome this presentation. The question that I, for one, have is whether Ifalabantwana has shared these issues with the sector committees on basic education. And if they did, what has been the response? Because we can only do so much in as far as the appropriation of funds is concerned. But in terms of the planning, the annual performance plans are approved by sector department. So one will encourage you, if you have not had engagement with the sector department or the sector committee that is responsible for basic education. Very valid issues that you are raising. I will leave it at that for now, Chairperson. I had several questions, but I just want to really encourage the stakeholders to go through our reports and see what we are raising. Are we not taking those things serious, or are we not agreeing with them, or are we capturing them? This does not mean to agree with everything, but most of the issues that you have raised, we have also engaged as committees, and we have resolved on them. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. Honorable Ocamp, please come in.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, yeah, I have been covered in a certain part by Honorable Ryder. I would just like to come in with regards to SALGA. One of the things that you mentioned is the problems that municipalities are experiencing with collecting money, and the fact that people out there obviously does not have enough money available to pay their municipal bills. With any company, you will go into the ground and you will lose your company if you do not issue invoices timeously. Now, to give you an idea, my hometown, Kuruman, I can tell you now that in the town of Gasekonyana, Kuruman, municipal bills aren't sent out timeously. I know that that is the fact in Gamagara and in various other municipalities. So, two questions in that regard. Firstly, can SALGA give us an idea of the percentage of municipalities in the country that do send out their municipal bills to people on time every month? Because I think that that is one of the biggest problems. People don't pay because they don't get an invoice to pay, firstly. Secondly, what is SALGA doing in order to ensure that the municipalities are capacitated and systems are in place to ensure that collections are done and that invoices are sent out for service delivery issues? So, Honourable Chairperson, with regards to that, we will not get anywhere if we do not have services in place and if we don't get those bills paid. We can come and we can blame a lot of issues for municipalities not getting the money that they should, but if they don't send out invoices, they most certainly won't get payments. Chairperson, then just on the other issue with regards to the wage bill, municipalities are where service delivery is on the coalface, where everybody really experiences it. That is where we've got to deliver to the poorest of the poor, especially in our rural areas. And when you've got something like cadre deployment, and when you've got people that are being appointed into positions that they don't have the qualification for and that they can't execute properly, you will always have a problem with regards to service delivery there. That is maybe one of the reasons why in a lot of municipalities we don't get the invoices sent out on time, and we don't have service delivery as it should be, because the wrong people have been appointed due to cadre deployment. And now we sit with a wage bill that must be paid, but services are being cut on various fronts, and the people on ground level is feeling that. We need to look into getting people employed that can really do the job, and that if they do the job, get money in, so that it won't be a problem to give proper increases, but at least the service that has been done. So if Salga can please just come in on that, and maybe if COSATU also can come in on the wage bill. I know what your stance are on the wage bill, and it should increase, but I really think it's about capacity and about cadre deployment that really should stop, so that we get people in positions that are fit for purpose, the best person for the job, and not the best person because he's a card-carrying member of a certain organization. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you so much, Honorable Okam. Honorable Kaiso.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson, and thank you very much for all the presentations that have been made by the stakeholders invited before this committee. But Chair, first, let me express condolences to the family of Amas, who's the head of organizing for the gift of the givers, who has been killed by mercenary forces of the Israel regime in Gaza. So I just wanted to express that condolences. Chair, appreciating this presentation, I would first start here that one acknowledge or picks up that the presentations also acknowledge the difficulty that the economy general is undergoing, and also makes really a number of suggestions, in particular COSATU, on areas that need to be considered moving forward. But what I want to get from COSATU is on the area of the 350 COVID-19 stress relief grant, which I did not hear you, Comrade Matthew, expressing, COSATU expressing itself with the fact that it's going to be extended. In fact, neither of the organizations who made presentation did pick up that it's going to be extended beyond 2023. Of course, it's very clear that the 350 moving forward is insufficient, and it would need fast tracking of the basic income grant, of which I thought COSATU would pick up immediately, as a sustained way of arguing the issue of the basic income grant. So our culprit, Chair, mainly, given despite the fact that there's been reprioritization of the budget here, the immediate culprit become of the one who cuts immediately is the one who did not spend, is the one who effect the cuts, immediate cut. Because if you don't spend for something that was for social expenditure by that particular department, it means that department has actually effected the cut even before any other person arrives. That service it has been cut. So this is what this committee has been experiencing over a time, that underspending was equals to cutting off a service automatically. So I would have loved to get to to hear COSATU and other organizations express themselves on this particular matter. For instance, if the invoices are returned unpaid or delayed in water and sanitation, a huge amount of money of unpaid invoices because of delay, and huge amount of money unspent because of delay in payment of invoices. So it's not a normal way of operation that one could slap hands for, because this result in a situation where it does seem that nothing has been done, no service has been granted, whereas there's the serious problem at the end of the day, you find it to be underspending. Now, on SALGA, I want to agree with SALGA, the Honorable Chair. The issue of, on the scope of practice, maybe it can be correct that there should be, an outreach to another scope of practice, in as far as what SALGA is expressing, that the revocation of the licenses as part of the conditions to assist the municipalities to move out from debt. I think it is too harsh, and that it should actually be reviewed such that it doesn't happen. Because ultimately the thing is we need not to become, there shouldn't be, a lot of tricks that are being applied just for the simple reason of administering finances. Because at the end of the day, the people who are going to suffer are ordinary people on the ground. Because our municipalities, given the situation that has shaped around them, and many metros have actually beginning to collapse because of a number of factors, including the outages affected by load shedding. So now it becomes complicated, even worse, when we think of, when Treasury think of revoking of licenses for the municipalities not to make any move, should they not comply or do something with regard to that. But it would be rather proper that that condition be reviewed such that it is not an impediment towards relief of the local municipalities. What I also don't want to get from SALGA is I don't understand around the issue of vandalism of the infrastructure found at the local level. I thought that the municipalities also have the capacity to deal with that. Unless maybe this is a different story. But one general issue is the issue around scrap metal, which has invited vandalism as well. Because if you look at the etiology of vandalism, you will find that at the center of it, it's the issue of extraction of scrap metals, every corner. So if there is no infrastructure which can deal with vandalism at the local level, it's going to be a problem. Infrastructure is not going to be sustainable. Therefore, there's a number of things that perhaps SALGA can advise or to handle at the and our local municipalities as well to deal with, unless maybe it has been said that there is a legislative gap in as far as the issue of dealing with a metal scrap, because I think it is the one which is a genesis of vandalism of infrastructure. Now, I just want to get to understand from SALGA, you said issues, you referred to issues such as contractors and overtime. I'm not sure what contractors are you referring to? Are you referring to outsourcing? If it's outsourcing, what outsourcing and what is the continuation or benefits of continued outsourcing? Whereas there's a high level of unemployment, which if it's outsourcing, because I would understand that the situation where, for instance, the Auditor General picks up that now there are people who are employed as agent to do auditing, whereas they are already employed people at a local level of the municipality. They are employed in the same, almost the same qualification or so, and then you get extra one from whose budget that person become employed. 5, if you had 10 staff members, you get 5 of these outsourced agents. You add budget. So I'm not sure, are you referring to those people or are you referring to what? And then there's an issue about overtime. Can you really unpack the issue around overtime so that one can understand what question can arise out of overtime? Maybe it's an issue of problematic operational issue that it actually needed to be sorted out at that level of the unit or departments individually. So, well, yes. So I also want to agree with the Salga on the issue of, but at the same time, look at the issue of implementation of a transport infrastructure grant. Because in some stages, you find that there's underspending in as far as integrated transport funding grant by certain municipalities. So I don't know how will this correlate with the issue of now another grant for assistance with roads infrastructure. Yes, I agree that this has had a serious burden to the local municipalities. I mean, road infrastructure. Since the collapse of the railway transport system and logistics. So it has put a lot of burden to local roads and infrastructure. But then at the same time, Salga must also assist us on this issue of, effecting the integrated roads infrastructure grant, which I'm saying often we pick up that it is being underused. Well, we must remember, because a lot of presentation do really talk to the issue. Honorable Chair,
please wind up.
Yes, the last point here was just the point which actually talked to all the presentation. I think the presenters has made it very clear, and this reflects back to the Gini coefficient of our country, which is very, very, very much higher, and that is being informed by how the wealth and and the growth of the economy, it has a burden on improvement of the life of our people. So these are the few areas that I wanted to comment about. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Kaiso. I'll be going to the presenters. Honorable members, any other honorable member would like to say something? No, closed. Thank you so much to the presenters again, and Comrade Matthew. I spoke about young people making presentation. Don't worry, they also take down your average. The average, pull it down, so you're young also. So I'm also recognizing you. First question goes to Salka. Chair, you talk about the impact of inflation on households and impact of interest rates on your debt. Remember that those two work hand in glove. What must be done about this? Number 2, again goes to Salka. You are saying your infrastructure is decaying. My question is, what is your comment about the inability of municipalities to spend infrastructure grants? Remember that was one of the big the main criteria used by Treasury. Chair, you raised the dissatisfaction about conditions, and amongst others, you mentioned the taking out of the license the licenses if you don't comply. What are the other conditions that SALGA is dissatisfied with? Have you engaged with NT about how you deal with this challenge? Next question is SALGA again. I'm just saying that SALGA, we are very silent on when you talk about the resources that are available to you, about the revenue raising constitutional right, when you talk about revenues available to you. What are the problems we're encountering in this regard? And what are you doing with them? That is raising, making sure that you use your constitutional right to raise revenues. This one goes to all of you. Everyone is calling for more budget allocations, and let me add, that is for good reasons. Of course, we all know that the adjustments were prompted by revenue shortfall, which has been a function of lower economic growth. From your perspective, what do you think should be done, which will have a positive impact as soon as possible on economic growth? Therefore, the other things will follow. Next question. Somebody who spoke about the health issues. We are struggling to, you said we are struggling to reach the 95 objective. And you make it sound as if this is the problem of money and money availability. But I want to use Botswana has achieved this with lesser resources, suggesting that the challenges are bigger than money. Your comment. Yeah, I think those would be my questions. And please come in the order that you made your presentations. Yeah, and please be economic with time as you give us these responses. And let me just add that we will be sending some questions in writing to try and give you enough time to also respond to some of the issues. And also, if there are questions that you think you can't respond now, you are free to give us those answers in writing. Let's start with SALGA, and then we follow the pattern in which we presented. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. I'd firstly like to tender the apology for our chairperson, Councillor Leseja. He had to get into another engagement. And thank you, Chair. I think some of the questions we will then send through written answers, and those are on the issues of invoicing late, on the issues of unspent road infrastructure grant and rehabilitation, and then on the issues of the impact of inflation and weaker economic growth and rising servicing costs. Chair, firstly, in terms of the consultation, there is consultation and we did not say it's ineffective. We are then, for the PPP, we are then saying that the comments that SALGA usually makes in these consultations are not always considered, Chair. The consultations are there. We are consulted by National Treasury and other organs of state. However, on the outcomes and when a legislation is finalized or regulations are finalized, we don't see how those our comments have been considered in the final legislation. In terms of the reductions, Chair, we are then saying the reason why we don't accept local government has backlogs in terms of investment into the infrastructure for basic services. And the reason why we don't accept the reduction, Chair, it's because it will further exacerbate the problem that municipalities are facing in bridging those backlogs or reducing those backlogs, Chair. And in terms of switching from direct to indirect, our NEC has resolved that we support the indirect to ensure that communities still receive investment into those infrastructure, and at the end of the day are able to receive the services that they need, Chair. In terms of the security On vandalism, that one, Chair, we will provide a written response on it. On the issues of capacity building, Chair, SALGA is investing a lot into capacity building of councillors and officials in various areas. I know in finance, we are rolling out capacity building for MPEC and for chairpersons of finance committees and MMC on oversight training, and on officials, there are capacity building programs on asset management, revenue management, and supply chain. Chair, I think in terms of the conditions, Chair, we partially agreed to the condition of current account and maintaining of the 80% payment rate. And our condition to the partial agreement, Chair, is these municipalities were unable to sustain payment rates for over a number of years due to the structural challenges that are in municipalities, such as affordability of municipal accounts that have raised the debt to 3 billion rand as we sit, the aging infrastructure that is contributing to the non-revenue water and electricity, Chair. So that is the one that we said it cannot be achieved in the immediate, and those current accounts of ESCOM cannot be paid in the immediate unless time is given to ensure that those reforms and support to these municipalities are implemented, Chair. The other one was, yes, on the maintaining of the current account of ESCOM, that the cash, the liquidity status of those municipalities is not looking good. Therefore, you'd find that what has been purchased from ESCOM and water boards is not what has been realized or sold by these municipalities. And there are a number of factors, Chair, that is contributing to this problem, not only the payment by consumers, as I've outlined, that there is high distribution losses due to aging infrastructure in these municipalities. Chair, I think I have outlined the ones that we could answer at this stage, and the others we will provide written responses. Thank you, Chair.
Next. Hello. I said let's come in the way we presented. So came in after Salga.
Yeah, I think that's me, Chair.
Yep.
Okay,
yes,
thank you.
Yes, go for it.
Thank you very much, Daniel from Alifa Labantwana. Yeah, just to briefly respond, and firstly to Honourable Mahlangu, just to welcome your encouragement to engage the education committees on the budget and on the BRRRs. That is something that we plan to do. We have engaged them previously on things like the Children's Act, but we are planning on engaging them around the budget. And just to say that we also engage the national executive departments, the DB, DSD, and NT on early childhood development. And what I would just say is that the capacity around early childhood development in government is very, very low. In the DB, since it's taken on the mandate for ECD, and also in the provincial education departments. So just to reiterate, for this committee, in looking at the ECD conditional grant and the provincial equitable share, to be very wary of any reductions which impact on early learning, because this sector is already very much underfunded and undercapacitated. Just on Honourable Kaiso's point about under expenditure, just wanted to reply to that, to say that under expenditure, from our point of view, of course, it can be a legitimate reason to reduce a budget allocation, but only under certain conditions. And those conditions would be that if the funds are being misused, or if there's no actual plans and capacity in place to spend the funds. But in that case, there has to be two caveats. And one is that if you're going to reduce funding for a program, there has to also be a turnaround plan in place, because one thing we can be grateful for in South Africa is a very rigorous budget process. And when budgets are eventually allocated after often many years of advocacy and research and engagements, to then have those funds unspent isn't necessarily because we don't need the program. It's often because we haven't got the planning and the capacity right. So if we're going to talk about under expenditure, we also need to talk about what do we need to do to turn these programs around. It's not enough just to say that we're going to cut budgets due to poor spending. The other thing is, in my experience, under expenditure is often used as a kind of smokescreen to justify a broader kind of fiscal consolidation agenda. And the reason I say that is often, and in this MTBPS, the actual data isn't provided on the underspending. The Treasury isn't providing us with information that shows this province is underspending, or this program is underspending, or this department is underspending. We're just told. So I would call for MTBPS budget review to actually contain information on underspending, so that if that is the justification given for a budget cut, then at least there's the data to back it up. And then finally, on Honourable Butelezi's remark about what we can do to lift growth, and this being the essential issue facing South Africa, which I think most of us agree on. And I think just reiterating that there are very well established and direct links, even if they're not acknowledged by the Treasury. I think this is a kind of mindset shift maybe that needs to happen in the Treasury, but outside of the Treasury, it's very well acknowledged when people are healthier, better educated, have better access to transport, housing, feel safer, there's more social cohesion. When all of those things are in place, in fact, those things are not just good for growth, but they're essential for growth. And so I'd like to encourage us to rethink social expenditure as important as economic expenditure on things like roads, railways, communications. When we cut our social expenditures, we hurt our long-term growth prospects as a country. Thank you.
Next.
Thank you so much for those comments and some questions from the speakers who just spoke now. We also acknowledge them as the Rural Health Advocacy Project. And I mean, I think to speak on this last question that was thrown to all of us regarding the economic growth and what is it that we can do to change this whole climate change environment, I think it goes to making a point that firstly, we have empathetic leaders. We have people who are put in power, in position of power, people who have good ethical conduct, people who have knowledge of the job, as also it was outlined that how can we make it a point that we don't have this corruption when it comes to provision of service of goods. I think if we have leaders who are honest and who are capable, will also be able to monitor and also input on the fact that you can't be costing a simple pen 100 rand, where else it's just 25 rand. So it's just izinto that requires abantu abanobuntu to just go back to basics. And also, I mean, to have just strengthening already existing and governance structures, especially at a community level. If you can have, for an example, good functioning clinic committees, well capacitated and trained in terms of participating into the planning and monitoring of healthcare services, I think that can also bring about change into the whole social injustice that we are facing. Yeah, I think that's it from my side. Thank you. Over.
Hello. I am having issues in terms of my camera. I'm not too sure as to why it's not responding, but just to give some responses. Yes, thank you so much. But just to give some responses. Sorry?
Hello. You can switch off your camera. It's what it looks like they've got some connectivity problems. Switch off your camera. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Honourable Chair. And thank you so much also to other honourable members who have given their inputs. I think the main one that I had gotten from Honourable Ryder as well as yourself is that obviously these recommendations are mainly like things that we should be handing over to the Department of Health. And I just wanted to kind of hark back to what the TB Accountability Consortium aims to achieve, is that the framework in which we are wanting improved accountability for program performance is through financial, programmatic, and political accountability. When we're wanting something to work better, it is not enough to just have a siloed intervention when you're wanting for that thing to improve. And so engagements with portfolio committees is something that we are definitely a proponent of. And I think our last recommendation that we had given was having this joint committee. And, this joint committee, we would want to suggest to, not only comprise of the Department of Health, but the Standing Committee on Finance, the Standing Committee on Appropriations, and the National Council of Provinces, as well as the Portfolio Committee for Health. I think if we're wanting improved change and the success of the 95-95, as you have said, Honourable Buthelezi, it's not just in terms of money, yes, that you're saying, but we're needing a multi-sectoral, multidisciplinary intervention when we're wanting these things. Yes, so we have been in communication and with the TB Program Director, Professor Norbert Njega, when it comes to program interventions, but our ultimate intervention and framework and what we're wanting to achieve is having engagements with all spheres of governance. Improved health governance isn't just in terms of the program itself, but having mechanisms to ring fence money that is meant to do a particular thing. And so I think it's important for us to, yes, not just focus on more money, but how is that money being used? I am also of the mind of what Honourable Member Sheikh Imam had said previously in terms of having further engagements with civil society and government. That is absolutely something that we are also advocating for, is for this bi-directional flow of information. And I think Daniel had also mentioned this, that when there are specific, elements of lack of resource allocation or underspending, there isn't a feedback loop in which civil society is able to engage with you when it comes to these things, that we're needing further accountability and transparency within these structures. Yes, so I think I've sort of answered all of your questions. And yes, Honourable Ryder, I will be, attending also to the reports from the BRRR. Thank you so very much.
Who's next? Yebo, who's coming in?
I believe it was Amandla Mobi next before me. Sorry to jump in.
Okay. Please, Amandla Mobi. If they're not there, please come in. Perhaps they're struggling with connectivity, but it is coming.
Okay, thank you. So I will also, my answers will be very brief because the previous speakers captured our sentiments as well as particularly as civil society. But just to answer the economic growth question, the question about we have a growth issue as a country and what alternatives we have. So just to implore Parliament and this committee and the country at large to recognize spending on healthcare, education, and social spending as actually investments rather than this expense that needs to be taken. Because when we invest in bolstering our HIV funding, particularly, for example, getting as many people on antiretroviral treatment as who are diagnosed as possible, we actually free up. So in the short term, it's a huge investment, but over the long term, we end up freeing up much of the funding that is supposed to be going towards other areas. And it's also through, I think, a report that UNH did, and even more conservative institutions like the IMF, which have been criticized for their fiscal consolidation, have recognized that investments in investments in HIV and AIDS funding is a powerful way to redress some of the issues that we have with GDP growth. So just imploring, I know that often the conversation on growth is seen from the revenue side, but even from the expenditure side, this investment, like powerful investment and return on our investment through social spending can actually advance the economic growth in this country, in addition to protecting the constitutional rights as is supposed to be. And then also to recognize that the cost containment measures that have been implemented do threaten underspending in various areas. So speaking to education, so we had the school nutrition program. There's been a crisis in the Eastern Cape, but particularly in KZN, that has been reported on quite extensively. But one of the saving graces of that that prevented the collapse of the program is the fact that they were monitoring. The Department of Basic Education, the National Department, responded effectively through monitoring of this program to ensure that the program gets back on track. And so just to reiterate that when you have reduction in investments in aspects like monitoring of the program, which the department has mentioned that these budget cuts could threaten the monitoring efforts. But when you have that threat to the monitoring efforts, it does actually exacerbate that corruption and underspending, wasteless, fruitless expenditure. So it's in that vein that, yes, underspending is a critical issue that must be urgently addressed, but reducing funding or as a response, as a blanket response across the programs, it ends up being the learners and the healthcare users who are punished for it, rather than the people, the service providers who are not doing what they're supposed to do, or the provinces instead. So yeah, and then the last thing to say that we note we welcome the point about the recommendations that have been advanced by this committee. We saw that in the budget speech earlier this year, and we look forward to seeing that again in the next budget speech. So thank you for that and the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Matsidiso. Ms. Siop Abek, Amanda.Mobi. No. Kosati Comrade Megan Parks, please come in.
Okay. No, thanks very much, Chair, and question. I think, Chair, just to Honourable Imam, and I think also yourself, Chair, you also raised it as well, what needs to be done. I think that's where we kind of fundamentally diverge from Treasury. I think Treasury has, approached the issue that we have an expenditure crisis, we have a wage bill crisis, hence we need to cut everything, and then somehow that will resolve our issues. And I think our issues, Chair, I think as all the honourable members have highlighted and their colleagues have highlighted from other organisations, it's a multiplicity of crises, and hence it needs to have a multi-pronged approach. So the unemployment crisis means we must grow the economy. Businesses are struggling, so it means we must remove the obstacles for them to operate and sell their goods, etc. What are the practical interventions? I think for us, Chair, number one right now, what used to be number one used to be ESCOM. I think we have really seen positive rise in that regard. And again, it's about how to reinforce ESCOM, because yes, there's good work being done. Chickens too early. There's still a possibility of additional stations tripping, etc. It's about reinforcing ESCOM. I think, Chair, for us right now, really the number one crisis is Transnet. Because the revenue shortfall of 56 billion rand, which is now cascaded into the expenditure crisis, is because of Transnet. It's killing the mining industry with a potential of about 34,000 job losses in the mining industry over the next few months. It's also going to have an impact upon manufacturing. Many clothing factories are struggling to sell their goods. Some are looking at air freights, etc., to try to resolve it. It's going to have an impact upon agriculture too. So we have to prioritize transit right now. And I think basically the same sensible war plan that government put in place to assist ESCOM, we need to see that replicated for Transnet. We don't have the luxury of time. If we don't move with Transnet, we think the pain we've seen now, the MTPS, will be a picnic to what we'll see in February. And I think similar efforts, Chair, to PRASA, to municipalities. To Honorable Ryder, I think for us, we're not ideologically married to whatever we want to call the solution to local government, whether it's district development model, whatever it might be. But the fact is, local government is in free fall. The fact is that, a decade ago, 10% of municipalities were in financial trouble. Today, it's well over 3/4. The fact is, 2 years ago, we had about 20 municipalities struggling to pay staff. Now it's about 36, and I'm sure by Christmas it'll be about 40. So there's a crisis. And some of the chairs about, can we afford 259 municipalities? And I think clearly we need to have a discussion about whether or not we can afford that. I don't think the average resident of Prince Albert or Kuruman cares about having a mayor. I think they care about having water, paved roads, sanitation, lights in the streets, electricity, etc. But we need to have a discussion as how to rebuild local government, how to consolidate, etc. Rather do that now when you have the space, as opposed to what you normally do as a country, wait for things to implode, and then it's very difficult to pick up the pieces. Chair, I think for us to also consider about the freeze on the infrastructure programs. That's critical to help giving the infrastructure that businesses need, for example, paved roads, electricity, etc., for them to operate and pay staff. We have seen, Chair, that if you invest in public services, like with SARS, for example, it can turn things around. We invested in additional staffing in SARS. The consequence was they were able to ramp up revenue collection. That benefits society. We think, Chair, that again on SARS, the quickest way to plug some of the fiscal financial holes is to have a conversation with the commissioner who's doing excellent work. What support does SARS need? And basically write them a check. If you give them a 10 billion rand, they'll give you an additional 100 billion rand revenue collection. It's the best investment government can do. And I think to yourself and to Honorable Klaiso, we think on the SAD grant, Chair, it has many issues. It's not perfect, but it's provided a lifeline to 8 million of the most poor members of society. It's a scandal that we haven't adjusted it once for inflation since it started in 2020. Yet we have found space to give ministers, etc., salary adjustments. At the very least we could do is to adjust it for inflation and have a roadmap to say how to raise the food poverty line, and also to follow the Scandinavian model of linking its participants to skills and employment opportunities. And likewise, Chair, the Presidential Employment Program has been a very positive intervention for young people, but we're seeing in the budgets, we're cutting all the time the amount allocated to us, and that doesn't make sense. We should be actually saying, let's extend it. It's quite affordable given the big bang impact it has. And really by February, let's extend it to at least 1 million active participants. By October next year, 2 million, because that's how you're going to begin to break the structural obstacles for youth unemployment. And again, Chair, it makes no sense if we're all of us, irrespective of our political parties, we're saying we're against crime and corruption. So why then do we allow the police headcount to decrease from 208,000 in 2010 to 172,000? And the MTPS actually says that further headcounts will decrease the police service. That is beyond suicidal. Chair, I think just to quickly to Honorable Imam and Ocampo on the wage bill. No, we're very glad that the MTPS Treasury is now acknowledging the wage bill is not out of control. It's actually decreased from 35 to 31%, and the headcount too has been plummeting. We actually need to begin to have a discussion about how can we rebuild frontline public services like Home Affairs to reduce the queues, which disrupt the economy, to health, which will invest in the productivity of workers, to education, which will improve the skills of workers, etc. I think, Chair, just quickly, other honourable members, the Honourable Mahlangu, we appreciate the parliamentary report. And I think for us, Chair, as COSATU, we take a social compact approach. We need to assist government because the government delivers public services, workers benefit, businesses benefit. If businesses can make money, then they can pay salaries, they can create jobs, and of course that benefits the revenue. So we do appreciate these engagements. We know it's not a once-off engagement. We also have similar engagement at NEDLAC, also with cabinet, etc. We do appreciate we need to move. Our frustration is that we don't see government moving with sufficient speed, and we're running out of time on many fronts. I think just quickly, Honourable Chair, to Honourable Ocampo, we would agree on the municipal rates issue. And even on the issue of fit for purpose, we want to see utility directors who have engineering backgrounds. We don't want to see people who don't have engineering backgrounds being tasked to manage our pipes, or paving of roads, or electrification, etc. It doesn't make sense. So we agree with that, but also concerned here that many municipalities are quietly skirting the issue of indigent grants, the issue of giving rebates to indigent households in terms of the free electricity, the free water, as they plug holes. And again, it's the poor paying the consequence. Honorable Klaiso was right about under expenditure, and that's why we're quite disappointed that in DORA and the budget, you're shifting expenditure, but you're not addressing the capacity issues. We need to resolve those. I think, Chair, let me stop there. I think I've abused the time, but I want to appreciate the Honorable Chairperson for massaging my ego by calling me young, and I will take any compliment I can get and run away with it. Thanks, Honorable Chairperson members.
Thank you so much, Comrade Nathan. Amanda, don't move your back. No, okay, that's fine. Load shedding is wreaking havoc on our meeting. Honourable members, that takes care of the presentations and the responses coming from the presenters. And we thank you so much, presenters, and please continue engaging with us. But as the honourable members were saying, please also engage the different portfolio committees responsible for the issues that we are raising. Again, do engage with the subnational levels of government, the provincial and the local government, on some of the issues, because it's when all these three spheres of government working with you, civil society, that we can be able to face the challenges and come up with workable solutions. Thank you very much. We really appreciate, as I said at the beginning, that for me, it's definitely encouraging to see young people taking community issues and running with them. So that's good for the present and the future of our country. Lubabalo, next agenda item is announcements.
Yes, Chairperson. But from our side, Chair, it's only to indicate that the members of the committee will be briefing the respective provincial legislatures next week on Thursday and Friday, but we'll communicate the information that we have from our side with them, and also colleagues from the provincializing officers are communicating with members as well to arrange the meetings. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Babalo. Mashile?
Yes, good afternoon, Chair. From the Standing Committee on Appropriations, we received the apologies after the meeting had commenced from Honorable Kwankwa and Honorable Ntangweni on the basis of ill health. And the next one is about the next meeting, which is going to be on Tuesday, the 21st of November, where the committee will be considering and adopting the draft report on the Division of Revenue Amendment Bill. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you. Thank you, Mashile. Thank you, Babalo. Before I close, just to say hardy to everybody. I know that we slept yesterday with sore hearts after the defeat of the Proteas by Australia, who have beaten before. I think something should be done with Proteas. Our members, this brings us to the end of the meeting, and the meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, colleagues. Keep well, bye.